Have congressional Democrats proposed any budget yet? I know we're talking about what the Republicans are doing. Have they proposed it? I haven't seen any of you. No. They were supposed to pass a budget months and months and months ago when they were in power. They haven't even proposed one yet. Have they proposed any spending cuts yet? No, we haven't seen them. Does anybody find that odd? They just sit back and wait for everybody else to do something and then throw mud balls? So where is the Democrat budget from congressional Democrats who've already blown off Obama's, and where are the spending cuts? I want to address another issue. Got an email from someone, and they said on this DOMA issue, Defense of Marriage Act, why can't the president declare a law unconstitutional? Where is it written that the courts have the final word? Thought that was an interesting point, particularly since I wrote Men in Black 6 years ago, and I said the judiciary is way out of control, and judicial review is an implied power, so that judges and justices need to be very careful in how they exercise. But that doesn't mean we want an all-powerful president either. Let me explain. When Obama says there is no reasonable defense of the Defense of Marriage Act, which is a flat-out lie, by the way, it's clear that's a ruse to undermine Congress and the judiciary. Then I would argue he does not have the authority to act as he has acted. Now, I touched on it the other day. Richard Nixon faced possible impeachment for, among other things, impounding funds that Congress had appropriated. Yet there's nothing actually in the Constitution that explicitly requires a president to spend money that Congress appropriates. But it was felt at the time by the heavily Democrat, very liberal Congress that wanted Nixon's head that this was a violation of separation of powers, a violation of the Constitution, and he was undermining Congress's core function as a body that passes laws and appropriates. And I don't think it should have been considered an impeachable offense, but I do think the concern that a president could make Congress impotent with respect to one of its core duties, thereby doing damage to the to the notion of separation of powers, is something to be taken seriously. And by the way, the forces that unleashed against Nixon today sit absolutely silent respecting Barack Obama's conduct. The point is this. The traditions, history, and experience of our society are crucial to its proper functioning. They are the bases, after all, that undergird the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Obama's proclamation that the Defense of Marriage Act, Section 3 in particular, is unconstitutional is of grave legal significance because it turns the Constitution into a defense for his political expediency. There's nothing in the Constitution that is offended by the Defense of Marriage Act, and there's no reason a president can't defend it unless the president decides he doesn't like it, and that's not good enough. And the political expediency will only move in one direction in this country, to the left. For conservatives on the right don't behave this way. Nixon not being of the right, by the way. Conservatives honor tradition, history, and experience, and we revere the process that divides and disperses the power of government, despite the left's constant allegations that we don't. To place in one person the power to decide what is or is not the law of the land, one person, is absolutely without any basis in our history, let alone our constitutional history. It is to be greatly feared, just as it was by our founders, who rejected it flat out. The power to execute the laws as the chief executive and to declare them constitutional or unconstitutional is an extremely destructive combination. Almost dictator-like, wouldn't you say? Our current system has its flaws, including far too much judicial power, seized by the courts. And there are ways to address that, and I wrote about it extensively in Men in Black 6 years ago, as have others, Bob Bork and so forth. There are many excellent essays on it. But you don't address it by empowering one man who becomes both commander-in-chief, the chief law enforcement official of the land, and then we add on top of that the one man who decides what is or is not constitutional. This used to be understood by the left, but right now the left, well, they've swung radical. I'm going to tell you something. I honestly believe that the left today would not mind, I'm saying it hasn't happened, but they wouldn't mind if Barack Obama decided that he would exercise his powers in a dictatorial way. I don't think they'd mind. I think the public sector union bosses would love it. I think members of his party in Congress would love it. I think the media, more or less, would look the other way. I think the intelligentsia, which has never really liked the Republican form of government and has always wanted some kind of top-down authoritarian model, as long as it's the model that they draw on their blackboard, they would be supportive of it. I mean, you don't call it flat-out dictatorship. Call it something pretty. Make sure the word reform is in it. Yes, I think that they would support a tyranny, a one-man tyranny, as long as it was their man. I believe it in my heart and soul. Phony little journalistic websites like Politico, they'd be talking about some nonsense. The Washington Compost would somehow twist this as a way of advancing individual liberty. The New York Slimes would be attacking those who dare to object. The only force for liberty in this country is us. You. You, me, and some of our brothers and sisters. That's it. The Democrat Party is not a force for liberty anymore. It's a force for big government, in whatever form. We have some outstanding Republican leaders, but for the most part, the Republican leaders, such as they are weak. They don't call me anymore. Oh, I'm so lonely. They probably don't even comprehend what I'm saying, not because they're not intelligent enough. That would be nonsense. Because they don't see the threat, or want to pretend it doesn't exist, or want to be accepted on Meet the Press, or what have you. The fact of the matter is that what the President has done in the Defense of Marriage Act violates the history, tradition, and experiences of this nation. Let me put it this way. No president who is respectful of most of his predecessors, who is respectful of the Constitution, who is respectful of the notion of separation of powers and co-equal branches would behave this way. He wouldn't, or she wouldn't. As a matter of fact, he'd be concerned that he was doing damage to our system, rather than, as Obama does, always looking for the gaps, or what he perceives to be the gaps, always looking for the opportunities to exploit. Now, there are, in fact, many reasonable, quote-unquote, arguments in defense of the Defense of Marriage Act. Our government makes decisions all the time that are based on morality. The vast majority of our criminal law structure is one based on morality. Rape is immoral. Burglary is immoral. Robbery is immoral. Embezzlement is immoral. Murder clearly is immoral. Now, there are other laws not based on it. These are lesser laws, jaywalking and so forth. But I'm talking about the core of our criminal law system. It's all based on morality, the morality of a nation. Same with issues that relate to marriage. These things didn't just happen. For the most part, states get to decide these issues. That's been our tradition, our history, our experience, the colonies before. You're not allowed to marry your daughter. Not just for health reasons. It's immoral. You're not allowed to have 5 wives. Not just for health reasons. It is immoral. You're not allowed to marry a goat. It's immoral. So we have certain rules that we put in place. We don't just grab them out of thin air. They're based on tradition, history, and experience, undergirded by morality. So, of course, society is free to define marriage. We've been defining marriage in this country since we were a country. We've been defining marriage in the states when the original states were colonies. Of course we can define marriage. So to argue that there's no reasonable position that we can take is absurd. And what about the 14th Amendment as applied through the 5th when it comes to the federal government? What about it? We can't have a national definition of marriage in order to protect states that wish to keep the traditional definition? Why is that? Who says? How is that a violation of the Equal Protection Clause? The Equal Protection Clause in the 14th Amendment was adopted having nothing to do with marriage and everything to do with the equal treatment of the freed black slaves after the Civil War. What's perverse, frankly, is the twisting of the Constitution, the twisting of our history, our traditions, our experience, to accommodate the political expediency of the left. That's what's perverse. Now, keep one other point in mind. The Defense of Marriage Act does not prevent a state from legalizing same-sex marriage. It prevents a state from exporting its decisions and imposing them on another state. That's its purpose. So you can see how devious and diabolical the president's decision is. He and those who advance his arguments in and out of court are not satisfied with individual states making decisions. What they want is for the most liberal and bluest states to impose those decisions on the rest of the nation, even though the rest of the nation may disagree. This isn't to be cheered, it's to be denounced. We'll be right back. I just feel it's necessary to spend time on these things, folks, because otherwise, in our busy days and a busy weekend coming up, they just flash past us and we move on and it's no big deal. And this is how the soft tyranny works. We accept more and more. We ignore what's going on as they just keep chipping away and chipping away. And we can't tolerate that anymore. The left represents, according to Gallup, about 20% of the population in this country. That means 80% of the population doesn't agree with their fundamental philosophical beliefs. And yet they always manage to use the instrumentalities of the federal government against us. This has to stop. And as long as I'm here, I'm going to keep pointing it out. We'll be right back.